Great to have with us as our halftime guest, Caleb Hall, who is the wrestling coach at Bayside Academy, Director of Facilities and Maintenance. Caleb, great to have you with us.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
I always like to, on those first conversations, get some input, some background, some bio on, in this particular case, Caleb Hall. So, it's that Southern tradition. Where are you from? And what brought you to Bayside?
Okay, so I was born in Indiana and then raised in the Chicago suburbs. Wrestling's a pretty big deal out there, so that's what I did during the winter. When it's 0 degrees outside, you really prefer to stay inside. From there, I went into the Marine Corps. I spent 8 years on active duty, 1 year in the reserves, and then while I was in, I was also a Marine Corps martial arts instructor. So I kind of kept up with that wrestling MMA background there, and then started coaching club out in California with the youth program. We also had some high schoolers involved. And then once I got out of the military, we ended up moving out here to Alabama, got involved with a club over here, and then became the high school coach at Bayside.
So now, what directly got you to Bayside? I mean, California to Alabama, that's a long move.
Yeah, we started off in the Daphne School District, and my son was doing very well academically, so we looked for somewhere that was going to challenge him a little bit more. And we found that Bayside was one of the more prestigious private schools in the area, so we decided to give it a try. And once we got involved in the community, everybody was very supportive. Everybody was very culture, similar culture mindset, and so we just really enjoyed it and decided to send him here.
So the move to Bayside was for the children to begin with, and then you becoming the wrestling coach and involved at the faculty there came later?
Yes, so my son actually transferred to Bayside before I was the wrestling coach here and before I was hired on staff here.
So the pursuit of the job as wrestling coach, did you learn of a vacancy or did they learn about you?
A little bit of both. There was there was a change in leadership there at the coaching staff, and some things had happened, and the spot opened up, and it was actually supposed to only be a temporary position. I was going to fill the spot until they had found somebody, but it seemed just to be a good fit, so they ended up keeping me here, and I'm really grateful to be here. I love working with the kids and being involved in the wrestling program.
Well, see, coach, here's what you get for being so darn good at what you do. I got to go back for a minute, though. You mentioned a suburb of Chicago. Now, I'm familiar with Glen Ellen in the Chicago area. Is that in the vicinity of where you were at?
So I was in St. Charles. I went to high school, St. Charles East, probably a 45-minute drive from Glen Ellen. Schaumburg and Naperville are some other big cities in that area that a lot of people are familiar with. So Geneva and Batavia were the surrounding cities right there, and we were about 45 minutes northwest of Chicago.
What about the adjustment to a much smaller culture, from a municipality standpoint? I mean, obviously, it is huge in Chicago and very small, comparatively speaking, in the Daphne area.
Yeah, it is. I mean, wrestling itself. When I graduated high school, there was about 16,000 wrestlers in the state of Illinois in high school. Alabama, I think we just broke 4,000. Women's wrestling is growing very rapidly. When I was in high school, again, there was maybe one on every 10 teams that you would run into. Now they have full girls lineups and full girls teams. They have their own state championships. So, the culture is, you know, it's growing a lot. And, being at Bayside, I mean, obviously our numbers are smaller than what I was used to. So you have to put a lot more effort into, talking to the kids that are going to school, seeing if they're interested in it, kind of explaining what wrestling is and what it looks like, just because it is so much newer down here in the South. I mean, the Bayside program, I think we're on our fourth year right now for wrestling. So it's a very new sport to a lot of people down here.
Does the wrestling at Bayside also include female wrestling?
Yes, it does. We currently have one on the team that competed last year, and we have, I think, one joining us this year. So the interest is starting to grow, and I think that it'll continue to do so.
Is that a different dynamic? I mean, from a coaching perspective, is it different coaching a female wrestler versus a male, or are the techniques and everything basically the same?
The techniques are pretty much the same. I mean, every wrestler has individual tendencies and styles. So, when I'm coaching, it's not this is the way you're supposed to wrestle and you have to wrestle the way I think you should. I try and teach a variety of different styles and see what they identify with the most. And then we can kind of do a deep dive onto that once they've identified that. And it's the same thing with the girls wrestlers. I mean, they're going to find their own style, and, coaching them is pretty similar. So I wouldn't say that it's really that challenging.
All right, I'm about to, I'm going to unveil how little I know about wrestling. From a technique perspective, does a wrestler adapt to the coach's technique, or do you see something in the wrestler that you develop a technique that's specific to them?
I would say a little bit of both, honestly. I mean, you have some kids that are very fast twitch, very explosive. And with those kids, there's a little bit more of a hard nosed style that they can identify with. If you've got a kid that's a little bit slower, a little bit less athletic, you're going to kind of tailor it to, their body type and their athleticism. I do a lot to try and increase the level of athleticism of all the wrestlers. We're this year going to be adding a little bit of yoga into it. We've got some gymnastics coming in. We're doing weight training. We do a lot of strength and conditioning with calisthenics and cardio. And you've got to be very well rounded. So the more athletic you are, the easier it is to apply the techniques. But based on, some genetic tendencies or where we're starting at with a certain individual, they will have certain moves that will, fit better to their body and to their style.
A lot of athletes in Bayside Academy are multi-sport athletes. Have you found that an athlete in another particular sport, say football, say basketball, whatever, tends to make a better wrestler?
I kind of find the opposite. I find that the earlier on somebody starts wrestling, the better they become at their other sports. There's a lot of back and forth between wrestling and football. They're very complementary sports. Both sports are, pretty physical. They're very hands-on. So I find that those kind of go hand in hand. Although I've got some soccer players that are good wrestlers, and I don't know, aside from just the athleticism that's required in wrestling, if there's any particular sport that translates better into wrestling. I do find that people who start off in gymnastics or maybe cheerleading and have some tumbling experience do really well, just because they have that really high level spatial awareness, which translates incredibly well into wrestling.
Does wrestling also require a certain academic or mental acuity? I mean, to me, psychology plays a role in any sport. How much is that true in wrestling?
100%. That's one of the biggest factors. It's, I tell people wrestling is almost like playing chess, but with your body. In chess, you can't just be very apparent about every move that you're going to do. You have to have some level of subtlety and be able to set somebody up for something. And it's the same thing in wrestling. For every move, there's, a counter for that. And you have to be able to set people up. And it's all just split second reaction time. So, the more cerebral you are about it, the more you can, kind of play with it in your mind of how things can work together. And, in our practices, we do a lot to try and build those neural connections where it's not just teaching a move, but it's teaching them in a series or a sequence of how things can tie together, and then showing them, hey, this is just an example of how some of these things can tie together. But there's, almost an infinite combination of ways that you can put things together to be able to set somebody up for something and, look like you're going for one thing and it really puts you into a different technique. And that's really where the high level wrestling starts coming in.
Where wrestling is concerned, obviously there is wrestling at the collegiate level. Eh, At a professional level, is there a professional level of wrestling? And I'm not talking what is it, whatever it is, the kind of more Hollywood type wrestling, but a collegiate style wrestling. Is there a professional level to that? And how far can an athlete go in that athleticism?
So, unfortunately, it's not like football and basketball where there's a professional organization where you can go out and make a ton of money doing it. You can really just go to the world team or the Olympic team at a high level. What we're seeing right now is the jiu-jitsu community is really exploding right now. So a lot of collegiate wrestlers and high-level wrestlers are transferring over into jiu-jitsu and MMA. So I guess, I mean, MMA, UFC would be like the closest translation into something professional. Majority of all people who have held UFC title belts have come from a wrestling background. There's Bo Nickel, Daniel Cormier. I mean, there's a lot of names that you could go on and on about their collegiate wrestling experience. But, the Olympics, the world team, switching over into jiu-jitsu, getting involved in UFC, MMA, that's really where it stops.
What do you want out of your team in this upcoming season? I mean, what's a winning year for you personally?
I think for everybody to continue to grow. I mean, I use wrestling as a means to an end for character development. I think it's a very easy way to do it because it's a one-on-one sport, because it's very personal, because it's high contact, it's an emotional sport. So I think that there's a lot of things that translate into positive character development. So my number one goal is how can I use wrestling to teach them, how to be better people. And then after that, it would be, making them fall in love with the sport. If I've got a kid that, doesn't win a whole lot, but they absolutely love wrestling, they'll get a lot farther than a kid that's naturally talented just because they're going to obsess over it. And then outside of that, it's just constantly growing from week to week. So we look for kind of systemic issues in the team and then individual issues as far as, the winning and losing comes. So if the team is losing and they're all losing in the same way, then I can reevaluate what we're teaching. And if they're only losing because of, that one person is losing because of this reason, then we can go over that. But as long as they're growing and they're learning, I think that it's pretty successful. I mean, I do have pretty high expectations for how we're going to compete at the individual and the team level this year. We should have more wrestlers on our roster. We had a lot of wrestlers wrestle in the off season. Some of them have gone to their first national tournaments, so they're getting higher level exposure. So, I have pretty high, expectations for what they can achieve as far as like a performance standpoint. But I think that all comes secondary to everything else.
Do all of the team wrestlers come to you, or are you ever walking down the hallways of Bayside Academy and you look at somebody and can you spot that somebody that should be wrestling?
So, yeah, it's probably a joke within the students, but at Bayside, I'm constantly talking to all the students, seeing if they're interested in it. I don't necessarily just want somebody who's a physical specimen. I want somebody who, may not identify with any other sport or may not be tall enough or strong enough to be seen as, a traditional basketball player or wrestler because, we've got weight classes and you can be, 100 pounds and you can be 280 pounds and you can wrestle. So, we fit every body type. We fit every kid. It doesn't matter what you look like, where you come from. I've got a variety of different body types and different backgrounds on the team. So I'll really take anybody and teach them how to wrestle if they want to learn. So there's not a specific type of individual that I'm looking for to join the team. But I do talk to just about everybody on this campus and see if they've been interested or thought about it before.
Before I let you go, you also are the director of facilities and maintenance. What does that entail?
So we've got a lot of big projects going on right now. We've got a new middle school being built, so trying to help, navigate some of the different things that the general contractors are doing, whether that's dealing with, moving transformers or natural gas pipes. We did a lot of summer projects this year. We painted our field house. We painted our stadium railings. We worked with our sound system. So a lot of the big projects like that. And then we also do some event setup. We've got Grandparents' Day right now that we just set up for. And then just routine maintenance tasks. So I've got a maintenance staff with me that, they'll operate on a daily basis, trying to knock out stuff that needs to be done on campus, whether that's, dealing with an HVAC that's got issues or, maybe even a toilet that's clogged or something like that. So they do pretty much all the general routine maintenance stuff around the campus as well.
Well, Coach, it sounds like you were wrestling with a lot of different things there at Bayside Academy. The wrestling coach, the director of facilities and maintenance, and our halftime guest tonight, Coach Caleb Hall. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.